Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that looks at little-known facts about famous people and events, little-known people and events, and the impact they have had, and sometimes just seeks to entertain. In this episode, we will be looking at how bootlaces have been used by various groups to identify themselves.
Gosh, Dr. Weaver, that doesn't sound particularly important or interesting. Why do we want to cover this issue?
In any of the counterculture movements, there are at least two reasons for the adoption of different styles or appearances. One is so group members can quickly identify each other, often in ways not known to the majority. Another is to express solidarity with a certain set of beliefs. It is important to recognize all sections of society, and the reality is counterculture often eventually affects the standards adopted by the majority.
Well, just to give you a boot in a different direction, the history of using different colored bootlaces actually has some cultural relevance. In a related issue, clothing colors and styles have long been associated with different groups.
I certainly know that's true. How do we know that? What is the cultural, political, and social relevance?
Have you ever heard the term bobby soxers? Well, it came from circa 1945 and related to teenage girls who were devotees of Frank Sinatra. They wore bobby socks and long hair, and the males often also wore bobby socks. They all spoke some sort of jive talk and identified themselves to each other with their appearance.
I see what you mean. The idea of teenagers differentiating themselves from their parents, that's as old as Plato's Republic. I'm sure in the 40s there was some desire to escape the horrors of World War II also.
Ancient Romans going to the Senate wore white robes, togas. Married women in ancient Rome typically wore something called a stola in public, which is different than a toga. If someone wanted to show their wealth, they would sometimes wear something purple because fabric dyers belong to separate color dyeing groups, and it required extra money to have a combination of red and blue, which make purple. Incidentally, this seems to be why purple became associated with royalty. In the 60s, it was easy to identify hippies by the traditional bell-bottom jeans, untucked and often colorful shirts. In that same era, people of African descent or those sympathetic often wore dashiki shirts, which are colorful shirts, generally with a straight line, not meant to be tucked in, and are directly descended from African style.
Well, I thought we were talking about laces. Lace coat origin is something of a debate, however. A common belief is that it originated from the skinhead culture in 1970s London. Another origin holds that it comes from the Southern California punk rock movement in the 80s. Either way, the color of your laces, especially on Doc Martens, was a method of expressing cultural and political beliefs. This allowed people to show either support or discrimination for various groups without widely broadcasting their support to people outside of the know.
What are Doc Martens? That's some kind of shoe, right?
Yeah, Doc Martens are footwear, yes. Predominantly boots, actually. The reason they were popular in both the skinhead and the punk rock scenes was that their main use was that of a durable and protective work boot, usually with steel toes, which was something that was also useful in a fight as well as for work.
I've heard something about ladder lacing as well. I understand that with this style of lacing, the laces don't cross over themselves. Why did this particular style of boot lacing come about?
Ladder lacing was actually used that the boots would be more difficult to unlace in a hurry, which meant that if you were knocked down or knocked out in a fight, it would take more time for the attacker to get your boots off. And so then came about the practice of lace cutting. Instead of untying and unlacing the boots, attackers would just cut the laces off, allowing them to steal the boots.
I imagine that all of the colors have different meanings attached. Does white stand for purity?
Interesting. I believe that depends on who you ask. The KKK uses white laces to show support for white supremacy and white power. Interestingly enough, I understand that blue laces represent cop killers.
Definitely not something you'd want to wear at a peaceful protest then.
And not at all. And not all colors have a negative connotation. Yellow laces, like the ones I wear on my dogs, represent racial equality and non-discrimination. Purple laces are also used to represent either support for the LGBTQIA plus community or represent membership in that community.
What do black laces represent?
From what I understand, most Doc Martens come standard with black laces.
That is true, and black laces tend to represent neutrality or perhaps even an apolitical alignment. They're definitely a safe choice to wear if you don't understand the lace code.
There are also red laces. Red laces are used by both the neo-Nazi and KKK groups to represent that they are blooded, i.e., that they have killed someone who isn't white. Not exactly something you would think they would want to broadcast.
Is lace code still in use today? I must admit I haven't heard of it before.
Well, it may not be as prevalent as it was in the 80s, but it is still recognized in certain circles, as was shown in 2017 when Doc Martens released an ad showing red laces on a pair of their boots, causing a bit of a public outcry, especially from the hardcore punk rock community.
Blue laces can represent two things: either killing a policeman, primarily by punks and later adopted by the skinheads, or supporting police. The idea of blue laces supporting police is new and seems to be in response to Blue Lives Matter, which is a response to Black Lives Matter.
I've also heard there is a connection between punks, skinheads, and the lace code. I have heard that skinheads originated in the 1970s in England to champion working class people. I've always seen them portrayed as neo-Nazi or racist. It seemed a little confusing to me.
Well, punks have always been a counterculture movement, much like the hippies. The punks are in some ways more militant and favor autonomy, whereas hippies tended to band together and be less militant. The relationship between punks and skinheads is complex. The skinheads championed the working class, while the punk movement favored a classless society.
What about the punk, skinheads, and neo-Nazi and racist portrayals?
Well, skinheads were not originally inherently racist or neo-Nazi. There was strong support for the working class among the skinheads. Remember that in 1970s London, the working class was predominantly white, which allowed for the concern for the working class to morph into promoting white culture.
And then the S.H.A.R.D movement turns this idea on its head.
Hold on a second. What is the S.H.A.R.D movement?
S.H.A.R.D stands for Skinheads Against Racial Discrimination. This is a clear segment of the skinhead movement, reverting to the original roots of the entire movement. For S.H.A.R.Ds, red laces represent a willingness to fight rather than killing someone that isn't white.
I'm very pleased to see there are people within the skinheads who wish to live in peace and to recognize the rights of everyone to live in peace.
Ambiguity is a very important factor in history. There are wheels within wheels. History as a whole is remembrance even of forgotten events and groups. Boots on the ground history, as I like to call it, as an approach requires looking at things others don't.
For younger people not involved enough to know what the codes are, their lace colors may be a stylistic choice rather than adherence to the meaning of the codes.
That's why I love it so much.
That's why I love it so much, friends.
There is a great deal more that can be said on this topic, and we encourage people to do their own research. We hope it excites you a little bit and inspires you to check out some of these controversial topics. We're not taking sides. We're not praising one group over another. We're simply reporting how things are or were. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us today. And we hope you'll join us again for more interesting topics. And once again, we are planning on a surprise gift for our subscribers. So you might just want to subscribe. Have a great day.
Goodbye, folks.